how I got in the field of nutrition. And it starts a long time ago. So some of you may not even been born yet. But in 1982, my husband and I were in our 30s. I'm 7 years younger than him. I was 31. He was 38. And he was training for the San Francisco Marathon. We lived in Northern California. So he was a runner and he ran a lot. Like on a weekend, he'd run 13 miles just for a training run. And I was a fitness instructor. So that was in the era of the dance aerobics, which was the beginning of jazzercise and all that stuff. And me and a friend had a business, ran a dance aerobics business. So we were really into fitness, and we actually were into eating healthy even back then. We had a little organic garden in our backyard, and I'm pretty much made all my food from scratch. We didn't eat out a lot. I had little kids, 3 and 5 year olds, little girls. And one morning in the shower, my husband noticed a lump right in here. And, he kind of paid attention to it. It didn't go away. And he'd noticed that his training had really dropped off as far as recovery. He wasn't recovering from his long runs as well. He also was waking up with night sweats in the middle of the night, which was really odd. So this lasted a couple of weeks, and he finally decided to go to the doctor. A doctor gave him some antibiotics, which would be the first, thinking it's a lymphatic infection, and, he has something in there. And a couple of weeks on antibiotics didn't do it. And so we had a pretty smart GP at that point. The fact that he actually decided to biopsy it at that point and not throw him on another round of antibiotics. So they biopsied the lump, and we got the phone call that changed our life forever. And that phone call said, you have stage 3B Hodgkin's disease, which is cancer of the lymphatic system. And, if you've had cancer, somebody who's had cancer, when you hear those 3 words, you have cancer, your whole world just comes to a screeching halt. Everything's turned upside down. And being so young at 38, it truly was incredibly shocking to think that he had cancer. So we started down the road of radiation, chemotherapy, and surgeries. And back in that time, when someone had lymphoma, they would radiate the whole body. Now they don't do that. But because we have a lymph gland back here on your neck, and you have a lymph gland on your ankle, and there are lymph glands throughout the whole body, they radiated the whole body. So what they did is they did 3 weeks of upper body radiation on him and 3 weeks of lower body radiation. So it was 6 weeks of radiation every single day. They radiated him. And then they gave him a little bit of a break. And then they decided to do a splenectomy. So your spleen is your largest lymph gland in your body. And it was fully involved with cancer. And he had a little bit of cancer in the liver. And so they took the spleen out, which you can live without your spleen. But they removed the spleen. So that was pretty major surgery, abdominal surgery, removing the spleen. They gave him, some time to recover from that. And then they started the chemotherapy. And the chemotherapy went on for about 1.5 years. And back then, when you'd get chemo, you would go in and spend the night in the hospital. He had one chemo that just, it made him so terribly, terribly sick that they changed it to another one. And they ended up doing 3 different kind of drugs on him. It was terribly, terribly hard on his body. And so you can imagine this man is a marathon runner, thin, right? He started this whole journey being really lean, maybe weighing 150 pounds wet. And so this 2-year journey was incredibly devastating to his body. And we had a great support group. He was very fortunate with work that his boss allowed him to take time off when he needed it. But it was an incredibly hard journey. And I know for those of you who've ever been on a cancer journey or who have family or friends, it's your whole world for a long time is treating cancer and living with that and not knowing, am I getting it all? I mean, are we getting it? Right. So at the end of 2 years, they stopped the treatments. They said, we're done. We've done everything we can do. And the last appointment that we had, we actually had gone back we would go back to the oncologist periodically, but pretty much the last appointment with the oncologist before he was released, we were told by the oncologist, and I don't think they would tell you this now, honestly, but he said, you probably are going to get another kind of cancer down the road because you've had so much chemo and radiation. And if you're lucky, you will live 10 years if you're lucky. And that's what we left that office with, those words. And it was pretty devastating because it was like, okay, he's now 40 years old and we still have little kids, and that's it. I mean, that is the answer after all this, after 2 years. So my husband, obviously very wiped out emotionally, physically wiped out. And so I'm a woman of prayer. So I started praying and I was like, Lord, there's an answer to restore this man's body. He's too young. We have little kids. I'm not ready to let him go yet. And there's got to be an answer to restore this body that's just been devastated by cancer and then all the treatments. Well, interestingly enough, 2 weeks later, literally 2 weeks later, I had a friend from church call me and tell me that a clinical nutritionist was coming to town to speak on nutrition. Now, this is in 1984. So, there was no PowerPoint, there was no computers. And so I said, well, I'm all over that. I'm going to come and listen to this guy. And a clinical nutritionist is kind of like saying, you've got an MD and then you've got an RN, right? So a clinical nutritionist is someone who has to pass a board certified clinical state exam. So his name was Dr. Jim McAfee, a very brilliant man. And so I went and listened to him that night. And he had a Teracell projector, which projected slides up on a screen. But it was the same as like a PowerPoint, right? Where you get good visuals. And here's the most amazing thing. He could have had a topic on any topic, right? I mean, it could have been digestion or something. But that night, he was speaking on the role of nutrition and the immune system, which is exactly what we needed to hear. And I'll never forget sitting there and watching those slides. As I watched that immune system, he would show immune system cells just globbing onto a virus or a cancer cell and just like slobbering all over it and attacking it. And it was just such a visual of what the body could do. And then he talked about all the things the body needed with nutrition in order for the immune system to work correctly. And for me, it was just this literally light went on inside of me. And I thought, I got to know more. And so we made an appointment with this man, Dr. McAfee, and he worked with my husband, started working with my husband. So here's what's amazing is, we're talking a long time ago, right? We're talking almost 40 years ago. We didn't know what we know now in the field of nutrition. And we didn't know the role, for instance, the gut plays in the immune system. And yet that clinical nutritionist started with his gut. He said, we have to heal his gut. It's been damaged tremendously by all the radiation and all the chemotherapy. And we have to make sure he's utilizing the nutrients he's putting in his mouth. And we need to make sure he digests everything, and we need to build up his good bacteria. Well, back then, nobody knew anything about bacteria. So that was the first thing we did. We put him on a gut healing program with, digestive enzymes and probiotics and some pre-digested proteins and things like that, so he could get some protein in the body. We need protein to build immune cells. So we started there, and we noticed right away that he was starting to have more energy, obviously because he was getting more nutrients in the body. And so we got pretty excited. And then he put him on some other things like zinc and B vitamins and vitamin C and some things to give the immune system tools to build up some immune function. When we had left the oncologist's office, the last lab work he had done showed that he didn't have an immune system. I mean, it basically was at the low end of normal, tanked all the way down. And the oncologist said, it's going to take a year, at least a year, to even get up into the normal range. And so don't expect it. You're going to get colds and flus and everything your kids bring home. You're just going to get it. And so you're going to have a really weak immune system. Well, we started him on this program, and then we would go back every 6 weeks for labs. And so we had been on the program 6 weeks and went back and had his lab work done. Now, here's what's amazing is, back in the day, right? That's a long time ago. We got a call from the doctor, which you don't ever get, right? You never get that call now, but we got a call from that oncologist, and he said, I just got your labs back. And he said, what have you been doing? And of course, we were freaking out, right? We're thinking, oh no, this is bad, right? He said, because he said, we're already seeing your immune system come up into the low end of normal. And in 6 weeks, that's just unheard of. And so you can imagine how excited we were, because we were seeing it on the labs that this was really working. And so, of course, we continued on with what we were doing, and every lab work we would get would be better and better. And he was starting to feel better. He was starting to put on some muscle and some weight back on. And for me, that was the defining moment for me to know what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I had been one of those people who had gone to school. You guys heard this on the other video when we were talking about finding your life path, right? I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know when I went to college. I was just kind of rambling through different kind of courses and not really knowing what I was meant to do and why I was here. Well, this was it. I knew that I needed to learn more. Well, I didn't end up going back to school until I was in my late 40s, but I did go back to school and become a nutritionist because it showed up in my husband's life, and I wanted to share that with other people. I wanted other people to know what could be done through nutrition and the power of nutrition to restore the body.